So to review, an ecosystem, or all the ecosystems all together, called the biosphere, consists of two parts: the abiotic parts, which are the non-living parts we talked about before, but we never called them abiotic. That would be the amount of sunlight you get, the types of soil, the atmosphere, the humidity, the amount of water, rainfall you get, nutrients in the soil, type of climate. Those are all abiotic features of an ecosystem, or the whole thing called the biosphere. And then there's biotic things, which are the living things, anything made of cells. So just to quickly review what we did the first few days of biology. There's like a hierarchy of from simpler to more complex that make up the biosphere. So these are the non-living things, atoms. Atoms bind together to form molecules and compounds. And the molecules combine to form cell pieces, organelles. And the organelles in the cytoplasm and the other different kinds of biochemicals combine to form cells. And cells is the first living thing on the levels of organization that make up the biosphere. So cells can be prokaryotic or eukaryotic, like we just saw. If they're eukaryotic, they have organelles, cells that specialize in the same way and live together doing a common function, a specialized function, are tissues. Example, muscle tissue, blood, nervous tissue, nerves. Okay, and then the tissues, several tissues work together to form organs like the heart, the stomach. Then the organs work together to what are called organ systems, like the circulatory system, the reproductive system, the urinary tract system, digestive system, muscular system, etc. And then all the organs work together to form an organism. You are an organism made of organs that are made of organ systems, which are made of organs, which are made of tissues, which are made of cells, which are made of organelles and biochemicals, which are made of atoms. Now, ecology deals with what the levels above the organism level. So all the organisms of the same species living in an area is called a population. So up there's a population of oak trees, a population of grass, a population of dragonflies, a population of ducks, different kinds of populations of ducks, etc. Now, a community is all the different populations in an area, not just individual populations, but all of them that live in an area. So all the ones I just talked about, if they live in the same area, that's called the community. Ecosystem are all the communities that live in an area, plus all the abiotic components, non-living components of that area. And then the biosphere is the whole Earth, which would be all the abiotic and biotic features taken together. So let's do some review questions, which is not an organizational level in the biosphere. Neighborhoods. So B is the answer because that's not a level of organization in ecology. Okay, so they want us to go from simplest, least complex to most complex hierarchy level of biosphere. So let's see. Organism's pretty low. So let's try organism. They make a population, which all the populations in an ecosystem makes a community, and then so I think it's this one. Let's compare. No, ecosystem is a part. No, a community, which they spelled wrong. A community is part of an ecosystem. It's all the biotic parts of an ecosystem. When population should be, okay, the order's messed up there. Okay, chipmunk. A chipmunk and a squirrel belong to two different species, but they live in the same area. That means they are part of the same community. Yes. Part of the same ecosystem. Yes. Able to have, no, they can't interbreed if they're different species. So it's A and B are correct. Which of the following levels of organization include both living and non-living components? That's an ecosystem, and anything higher than that. So ecosystem, biosphere. So B and C are correct. There can be many types of populations within a given community. Yeah. A community is all the different populations, all the different species living in that community. So true. Okay, which is not true of ecosystems. Think of what an ecosystem is. It's all the biotic and abiotic features of a given area. So, are ecosystems only consisting of biotic features? No. So that's not true. So that's the correct answer since I don't have any more than one of the above choices, which is not an abiotic factor. So which one is a living thing? Rocks? No. Water? No. Temperature? No. So all the things listed there are abiotic factors. So none of the above. Letter D. Which is not a biotic factor, so which is a non-living thing. People, no. Plants, no. Sunlight, yeah. Sunlight is not a living thing. So it's letter C. So we're going to just talk about some abiotic factors that shape ecosystem. I mean, different life forms are adapted for different ecosystems because of the different abiotic features. That's why you see different things living in a desert than you see in a forest. Kind of common sense. Okay, climate is an abiotic factor that shapes the types of life forms that live in that certain climate. We look at the climate on a snapshot of the climate every day, or every week we see what the weather's like. That's like a snapshot of the climate for that particular time of the year. The climate basically recycles, repeats every year, whereas weather is like a daily thing. So the wind, the the amount of sunlight you're getting because of the season you're in, the amount of water you get because of the weather, and basically because of the water currents and the atmospheric currents. Those abiotic factors determine the weather. So climate is like the average weather conditions in a region over a period of years. Now, also elevation depends. The weather depends on the elevation as well. Okay, so there's zones throughout the world, climate zones, that you can predict what the weather is probably going to be over the years. So because of the location of the continents and the currents in the ocean, that affects the winds, the currents in the air, and that affects the weather, the precipitation. Okay, so another important abiotic factor is the kind of gases that make up our atmosphere. The atmosphere is about 70% nitrogen gas. And nitrogen gas, we don't really do anything with it. It doesn't affect anything, but it's very important that it's there because plants need that nitrogen. That's one of the major nutrients that plants require to make their protein. We don't use it as animals. We get it from the plants we eat or from the meat from animals that eat the plants. So all the nitrogen comes from the atmosphere when it's changed into nitrogenous nutrients that the plant can then use. Okay, but there's other gases in there, carbon dioxide, a little bit of oxygen, but carbon dioxide and water and methane and some other gases, methane, these three gases are greenhouse gases. Now, what that means is they retain the heat that is produced when sunlight hits objects. Some of that sunlight's reflected off the object, and that's why we can see objects during the day. And some of that sunlight energy is turned into heat, and that heat's retained if you have these gases in the atmosphere, which we do. Now, we've really greatly increased the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by industrialization, which started around the end of the 1800s and is happening even up to today. So when we burn fossil fuels, you continue to pump carbon dioxide into the air, making the air hold the heat for a longer time. In urbanization, where we cut down trees and forests and pave over places where plants can grow to make roads and buildings, that's taken away the things that use the carbon dioxide, the plants, to photosynthesize. When we poison our oceans, we're killing algae that also take out the carbon dioxide. So it's important that we start thinking of ways to reduce our emissions, our fossil fuel emissions, so that we can prevent global warming from getting out of control. Methane gas is the gas that a lot of bacteria produce that as a waste product. And well, the bacteria are in our gut, and they do that. We pass that gas through the other end. So greenhouse gases are essential to keep the earth warm enough so that everything doesn't freeze solid, so that all the heat that is produced by the earth after the sunlight hits it doesn't just go back out into outer space. But too much of it, like we have now, is knocking us into serious issues, like the ice caps are melting at an increased rate. That's causing if you live on the beach, you're in trouble because the waters are rising significantly every decade from the ice melting on the cap. So fossil fuels are like coal, oil, natural gas, and they're from the remains of plants and animals that died and got covered and then pressed down because of the top layers of earth, and turn into those fossil fuels. It's not a renewable source because that was from the jungles and all the dinosaurs that died during the mass extinction from the asteroid hit. Okay, so when we mine the earth and obtain these fuels, fossil fuels, it's much like respiration to the fuel, which is hydrocarbons, a bunch of hydrocarbons, carbon and hydrogen mixed to form fossil fuel molecules. We add oxygen that's burning and produces carbon dioxide in water, basically. And it's the carbon dioxide plus lots of energy to run our motors or our power generators in electrical companies, power plants. So that carbon dioxide is a culprit for, like I said, global warming. So more and more heat is getting trapped by the atmosphere as we continue to use fossil fuels. And this has drastic changes in climate. Think of all the storms we've had recently. Sea level rises. Different places that are used to plenty of rain for crops start not getting that rain pattern, and other places get the rain which aren't used to it, and mass flooding occurs. So we have to do something about this. Because the earth is tilted as it goes in its orbit around the sun. Let's see. Let's make this picture bigger. Till the earth stays constant. So when you're over here we are in Florida, and when we're over here, let's see, here we are in Florida, we get more direct. Let's do someone in like Chicago up here. Exaggerating. Okay. these guys get less direct rays. That would be their winter. And when half a year later, this would be their summer, where they're getting the direct rays of the sun. Okay? Whereas these guys are getting their winter. Well, we're getting our summer because they get less direct rays from the sun because of the slant. Okay, so this changing of the north and south getting direct and then not so direct sunlight causes the water currents. Hot water rises and cool water sinks, and because of the differences in the temperature throughout the year, average temperatures between summer and fall, winter, that causes the movement of the currents, and which heats the air and causes currents in the air as well, and the weather. So here's a better picture of the Earth going around the sun. It's the angle of the Earth's rotation that causes it to the seasons to occur. So here's the summer solstice. That's when the daylight hours are longest. Here's a winter solstice. That's when the nighttime hours are longest. And check this out. This would be our summer. We're getting direct rays. We're tilted towards the sun. Right here. Let's see. We would be right here every night. Every day we'd be in that position. We would be getting less direct rays from the sun because we're slanted away from the sun. So that's our winter. And where we're slanted towards the sun, that would be our summer. And then between those would be fall and in spring. Okay, so it's these different, either being slanted towards or slanted away from the sun, that causes temperature differences, that cause the currents, that cause the weather. So all year round, obviously the equator gets direct sunlight, because if you look at the picture we just showed you, it really doesn't slant away or towards the sun because it's on the equator. And so the heat or the hot water gets hot and it warms the air, and then the warm air rises and the cool air from the north and the south fills in where that hot air has risen, and it produces these currents in the atmosphere and, of course, in the water. That produces wind, and that moves the clouds around, and that's where our weather patterns are from. And same thing happens with water currents, and basically let's review. Greenhouse gases are dangerous and should be reduced as much as possible. No, we need some greenhouse gases, or else our world would be a frozen place. We need the atmosphere to retain some of the heat. So that's false. So carbon is used, reducing carbon dioxide in the air. Now, I know plants do that. they use the carbon dioxide in the air and turn it into glucose, but I don't see any of those here. Fermentation is a primitive form of respiration. It produces carbon dioxide in the air, so that's not it. When animals die, they produce, as they break down, bacteria breaks the body down into smaller components, releasing carbon dioxide into the air. But if the animals are buried under the earth, under layers, that process is very slow, and the deeper they are, the less the carbon dioxide will be released. In fact, it will stay in, it will become fossil fuels. So when you take bodies and you bury them under the surface of the earth, it prevents bacteria from releasing the carbon dioxide into the air as they feed on it. Okay, so that's where the fossil fuels came from. So that took the carbon dioxide out of the air. The amount of life on Earth decreased. No, if the amount of life on Earth decreased, the carbon dioxide in the air wouldn't be used by plants. So I would say letter B for sure. A very warm winter up north this year would indicate that global climate change is occurring. Well, that seems true, but no, just one warm winter doesn't make for global climate change. It has to be a pattern every year that the winters would be unusually warmer. Okay, this is a daily forecast. That's not climate, that's weather. Okay, I pushed the button too late. Okay, greenhouse gases in the atmosphere cause the atmosphere to retain its heat. So this is the closest answer to matching what I just said. Now, letter A is interesting because something in the atmosphere acts as a shield protecting Earth from harmful UV rays. That's the ozone layer. That's produced by oxygen reacting with the sunlight up there in the higher atmosphere and producing ozone, O3. The surface of the Earth is heated unevenly because of the tilt of the Earth in its orbit around the sun. But what does this uneven heating of the Earth cause? Well, it causes wind and water currents. The tilt of the Earth also causes the seasons, but the seasons cause the Earth to heat unevenly, causing the wind currents and water currents. And it's the wind currents and water currents that cause the climate and the weather conditions. Okay, so near the equator, where the climate generally stays hot all year round, high temperatures all year round, it's called a tropical climate zone, but it's very wet there. What type of plant adaptation is probably not found in this climate zone? Vines that climb up trees to reach sunlight. Yeah, that would be found because these forests are very thick and vines have to get up there to photosynthesize. Drip tips on leaves to quickly shed excess water. Yeah, too much water will rot the leaves. we're talking about adaptations for tropical wet places. Large leaves absorb as much sunlight as possible. True, because in a dense forest, there's a lot of competition for the sunlight. So you get big leaves out there to capture as much sunlight as possible, since there's so many leaves in this dense forest. If you can get the sunlight before it leaves under you, you got an advantage. So being a bigger leaf will do that. Waxy coverings to protect against drying out. Well, you don't need that, because you're not going to dry out, because it said these are rainforests, tropical rainforests, extremely wet. So that's my choice. That adaptation won't be found in the populations of plants in a tropical rainforest. Won't be found.